Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name's Josh Odgers. I'm the host of Online with an Architect. Very privileged today to have Elena. I'm sorry, I'm not going to butcher your surname. You can please introduce your surname. But yeah, welcome to the show. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. My name is Elena Luk'yanenko. I'm work at VMware and I lead VMware Hyperscaler Solution cloud solution sales team for Asia Pacific and Japan, based here in Singapore. And thank you, Josh. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, these hyperscaler solutions with VMware are a hot topic in the market. They're something, my company and myself personally are very interested in. So really glad you could join us. Do you want to give us a quick overview of what these VMware cloud solutions are?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of you might be familiar with VMware Cloud Foundations that most of organizations are having in their on-premise data centers. So VMware Cloud Foundation, that's a combination of vSphere, vSAN, NSX technologies. So what VMware Cloud is technically the same VMware Cloud Foundation, but it applies to different clouds. What we call in VMware multi-cloud really means that you have opportunity to bring your VCF on-premise, on your private cloud, with your partners in colocation, in any public cloud that is out there, or to the edge. And it's the same software stack that you can bring from left to right and at any time from right to left.
Yeah, fantastic. I think, I've got a lot of experience with these offerings, and just the fact that you've got that standard platform across all the providers, whether it's on premises or in the cloud, is huge value, I think, to businesses. Can you tell us a little bit more about, where this came from and why VMware have gone down this path?
Well, I think that if we look at the evolution of VMware, VMware has been known as the leader in virtualization. That's where the story started, and we call it chapter 1. Then we saw as many customers and organizations are going on the cloud. That's where we started creating this private cloud solution. And this is where our core strength is, hyper-converged solutions that you can host on your premise or in private cloud. And then with the recent years, especially with pandemic, we saw more and more organizations getting on the public cloud and to diversify their multi-cloud strategy. And that's where first we've put our VMware Cloud solution on AWS. This is the product that VMware has built. And later we had already partnerships with all the other hyperscalers, with Microsoft, with Google, with Oracle, with Ali, with IBM. And recently there is more and more being announced, probably at Explore. So to meet our customers where they are. Because what we're seeing today that unlike previously when the customer were going all the way into the cloud using single cloud provider, when pandemic came in, we saw there is more diversification, and that's why the multi-cloud really became very robust. So we want to be there for our customers where they want to operate.
Yeah, I think giving the flexibility across providers is fantastic. I think, in the future, we're probably going to see a lot of scenarios where customers use multiple providers actively at the same time to provide both best of breed services, but also business continuity, disaster recovery, and things like this. So what have you seen from an adoption perspective in the APJ region where we're both based? I'm out of Melbourne in Australia. What have you seen the most use cases and business drivers for these solutions so far?
Mm-hmm. There are 5 main use cases that we're seeing. Usually most of the customers will start conversation and they will use a VMware Cloud solution as a DR. So think about it. Usually you'll have on-premise side and you have very expensive another side which is only for DR. You can significantly save your cost and put that DR cluster on the cloud, on the public cloud, and have exactly the same software sitting there on the cloud. So in case your application falls over or there isn't any case, then it smoothly goes to your DR side. It's cost effective, it's fast, and it's also secure. So DR comes usually as as a conversation opener, I would start, or start the first use case. Then it comes as a bursting to the cloud, where we see a lot of customers are getting out of capacity in their data center and they require extra capacity. So instead of buying new hardware, they can leverage the offering on the cloud. That's, I guess, the case for any public cloud. But here is the thing is that you do not need to make any changes to your applications, but you just continue using the same system, the same processes, same environment. There is zero re-IP required. So you're just extending on the cloud as if it were your server sitting in your data center. So the extension to the cloud is the second use case. And then the third use case would be already DC exit, right? So you decided, well, I don't really want to hold all this hardware. For example, maybe your lease agreement with the hosting provider is coming to an end and you really want to optimize your financials. And that's where we see really large migrations. It's usually big transformation projects that our customers are making, that they're completely exiting their data center and their data center is on the cloud. The fourth use case would be, it's coming along with this transformation. It's around VDI. So our Horizon offering.
Absolutely.
Very often we see Horizon hosting on AVS, which is Azure VMware Solution, or on VMC on AWS, which is solution on AWS, or CBS, GCV. And really for the customers, that is an option for the same seamless migration, the highest level of controls and highest level of security, to have their VDIs on the same VMware platform rather than hosting VDI on the native cloud. And the fifth scenario is the application modernization, right? So once you already moved your application on the cloud, you can modernize with Kubernetes. And that's why we have our Tanzu offering that runs seamlessly on our VMware cloud infrastructure. So that's usually where the customers continue evolving their applications. And, the strategy usually, most of the customers, when you talk to them, of course, they want to modernize. That's the end goal. I want to run cloud native applications. I want them to be super agile, lean, access all the innovative services that cloud can offer. However, that path from on-premise to modernization, it's a long path. Usually, people underestimate the complexity and the cost required to fully modernize your applications. And let's not forget, not every application requires modernization. Some applications, it's easier to throw out and to buy similar SaaS solutions. And that's where the strategy that we offer to our customers, of course, analyze what applications you have in store, then migrate to the cloud first, release all that infrastructure that you have today on premise, save the cost operating that infrastructure, the IT cost, the human resources cost. And then from there, once you're on the cloud already, first of all, you can access all the cloud services. You can innovate. You can have access to, databases, cloud native, Kubernetes, AI. And then from there, you can already modernize. So if you want to rewrite your application into microservices, you are free to do so. But now you are not pressed by the time. You're already running on the cloud, so you can take your time to really think over your strategy and modernize from there.
Yeah, I think there's two that I find very interesting. A lot of customers seem to want to modernize, and like you say, that's a long journey, and they try and rush to get there. And a lot of the time that's driven by a data center exit strategy. So these two, to me, go hand in hand, and a customer that wants to exit their data center might try to rush their modernization, and that's more than likely going to lead to high risk and failure, and they might have to repatriate. And I think the beauty of going to something like AVS is that you can go into the cloud, you can exit your data center, you can do so in a very low risk way, in a very fast way, and then you can start that modernization journey having already exited your data center. And like with Tanzu, as you mentioned, there's an opportunity actually to keep all of your workloads on a standard platform and then be able to move them between multiple cloud providers. So I think some of these use cases really go hand in hand, and there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, you're right. And that is one of the mistakes that we're warning customers not to make that once you're doing that migration, break it down and do step by step. Don't try to do everything at once, because not only they're trying to modernize, some of them trying to do data modernization, right? To go on the databases on the cloud. They try to get to the zero trust security at the same time. So all in all, adds a lot of complexity and things get stuck for sure. So get your project management right, break it into the steps, and go from there.
Yeah, because I think app modernization is a big jump, obviously, as you said, and a lot of people think that that can be done for all workloads. So even if 50% of your workloads can be modernized, assuming you could even click your fingers and have it done immediately, then you've still got 50% of your workloads you need to consider. So having a solution that can cater for both, I think is fantastic. And the other thing I really like, apart from like time to value, which we should definitely cover off, but I like the fact that a customer can stand up an environment in, say, AVS and GCVE, test them both out with a standard, pretty much a standard platform with all the tooling they're used to, the same hypervisor, the same storage layer, and then make a decision, an informed decision after doing a proper proof of concept. And that proof of concept can be done pretty promptly because both the platforms and all the hyperscalers deploy the SDDC automatically within a matter of hours. You can stand up a proof of concept, do your testing, validate which one is better suited to your requirements, and then make that decision on which way to go. And if for some reason, from a technical perspective, you want to choose one, but the commercials don't stand up, then you could, of course, choose another provider that has maybe a more attractive commercial offering. So I think it's really good to think more from a business perspective and the flexibility that multi-cloud offers, rather than focusing just on the tech side, which is clearly pretty standard across most offerings.
Absolutely. The technology works. Let me assure you that. So that even POC, there is no point making POC. I usually tell to our customers, let's start with a pilot. Let's take that first application and move it. But as you mentioned very rightfully, is that a lot of times it depends on commercials, and each of these cloud providers have their own advantages depending on what you have today in your data center.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great thing to choose is over time, let's say GCV is the best option for customer A today, but customer B thinks AVS is better for licensing reasons or something else. If those situations change, they have the ability to move in a reasonably easy manner. So I just think this is, such a unique time in the market where you can actually move your infrastructure using that trusted platform, the VMware platform, very quickly and easily. So as an architect, I'm super excited about that because it makes my job to create business continuity solutions, much, much easier.
Yes, absolutely. And talking about the business continuity, you can actually do DR from cloud to cloud, right? So you can DR from VMC on AWS to AVS. And unlikely, you cannot do it from native AWS to Azure. That would be very complicated. And to the point also, I wanted to mention that the customers don't have to choose one provider. We see now a lot of customers, even in APJ, that have 2 and 3 providers. VMware is VMware Cloud, but running on 3 different public clouds, not to mention their public cloud and or private cloud and on-premise. We have customer, for example, like Lixil in Japan, that is leveraging GCV and AVS at the same time. Some applications make sense for AVS because it's either Horizon, which requires Office 365 licensing, and that's where they come for free with AVS, or this is the Windows Server and SQL Server, which has very good benefits, commercial benefits with AVS. And there are some workloads that are running on GCV because they are connected to the existing GCP applications that are running on the native Google Cloud. So we do see customers leveraging multiple VMware Cloud solutions in the same organization.
Yeah, and I think that's going to become more popular. For sure,
Yeah.
from my perspective, I think if I'm helping a customer with a strategic roadmap, I want them to think about, not having all their eggs in one basket and making sure that they've got a landing zone set up in multiple providers, and they understand and they've tested the connectivity and made sure that, everything's functional. But to your point about proof of concept versus pilot, I think you're right. VMware is a proven technology. The SDDT stack is automated and deployed, so it's consistent, reliable. So we can probably, in most cases where there's no organizational constraint, we can skip a POC and go straight to a pilot. And then once we've got a pilot, we follow a solid architectural methodology to make sure everything's working correctly, and then we can move things into production in a fairly timely manner. So I think from a business perspective, that's going to shorten, that time to value and be able to help customers who are, they've got an urgent problem. It might be a data center exit, it might be unreliable hardware, it might be out of warranty hardware, things like this. Very difficult to fix on premises quickly. But with these solutions, and one of the reasons I always push these solutions is because there's so many business drivers to use them. And the only objection that I ever hear to these is actually cost. And I'm not sure that cost is a legitimate objection when we actually go through and see the value of what it's providing. I actually think that people underestimate the cost they're spending on premises. And they think that the charge in the cloud is high. But for things like AVS and GCVE, I think actually for what you get, considering 80% of the architecture is kind of prepackaged for you, I think they're extremely good value. So what are your thoughts on the cost side, and what sort of objections do you hear, and where does the truth lie between the perception and the reality?
Yes, you're absolutely right. We see that customers underestimate the cost that they're having today on the premise. And when they compare with the cloud, they don't compare apples to apples. If we take, for example, Azure VMware Solution, which is VMware Cloud on Microsoft Azure and on-premise environment, and even Azure Native, 3 comparisons, right? So we're seeing that average TCO savings, average total cost of ownership savings, compared to on-premises data center is 22%. And average TCO savings compared to native public cloud is 32%. Now, from where the savings are coming from? So when you compare to on-premise, you cut costs and shift to OpEx. You don't have people now running your infrastructure. If we compare like what you actually manage with on-premise, you have management, you have application layer, you have operating system, then you have all that IT cost, which is patches and updates, hypervisor, storage, service, power and cooling, facilities, real estate. This is all cost, right? This is human resources, this is power. And sometimes this is not being factored. But when you're moving to AVS, you're still in charge of managing your management layer, applications, and operating system. But everything that is under that is actually managed by Microsoft in this case, or any other public cloud provider. So that saves you all that overhead IT cost. And that's a significant reduction in your operating cost. Then if we take, for example, the licensing component, let's assume you're running on Windows Server and SQL Server. Here in APJ in Asia, we still see a lot of customers running on outdated and 2012 Windows Server and SQL Server. And that means that since they're out of support, these customers have to pay for extended security updates. It's a hefty bill. However, once you move it to the cloud, to whether it's AVS or to Azure Native, those security updates are coming free of charge. That's where you're saving just on that. There are also additional benefits, it's bring your own license, that you don't need to buy the same licenses on the cloud. And all those licensing costs stack up to another saving. But then also when we compare to Azure Native, or let's say it's IaaS infrastructure, where normally those IaaS infrastructures, they're run by VMs, while with AVS or VMware Cloud Solution, we're running by nodes, right, by hosts. So it's a bit of a different architecture, where in case of AVS, you have a pool of resources, and you can optimize for your memory, for your storage, and that creates a much higher density, which means you can put much more workload, much more VMs into this pool of resources, and they're running more optimally than on the VMs, where in VMs you have different t-shirt sizes, and you really have to feed them all. You have to have reservation of 20 to 25% of that VM has to be free. We call it, I've seen your blog, Josh, you call it cloud waste. Right?
Yes.
So there's a lot of cloud waste in those Azure VMs. So just from that right sizing, you have another share of savings compared to the native solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to give Steve Kaplan credit for the term cloud waste. So Steve came up with that. So thank you, Steve. But I stole it for my blog, as I steal all my good content. It's clearly not from me. But basically what I was going to say on this point is, if you compare a physical server back 20 years ago to a virtualized environment, going virtual makes a huge amount of sense. Obviously, it's been proven now for 20 years. To me, native cloud is like physical servers because, like you said, we're managing that instance and that T-shirt size, and we've got to have free space and we've got to pay for the resources, and we're not benefiting from the overcommitment of CPU. We're not enjoying the benefits of the storage layer with compression and deduplication and all these things. So to me, it's very simple. Something like AVS or the VMware multi-cloud solutions is just virtualization on the cloud, whereas the cloud is almost like deploying physical servers from both a business and technical perspective. So I think purely from a cost perspective, and this is something Steve Kaplan and I did a lot of work on in our previous roles, that there's a huge saving to be had by that right sizing that you mentioned. And I don't think customers should overlook that point, that simply right sizing your workloads and then moving them into AVS or GCVE is an enormous saving, and the consolidation ratios will increase and your performance will likely be better as a result of that activity as well. So right sizing is the old architect's favorite thing to do, right? It makes everything better from a business perspective and also a technical perspective.
We actually did the assessment studies in 2021, and we've seen the average host reduction by 40% compared to on-premise data centers. And that's basically you can scale it up, scale it down at any time. There is no additional load balancing needs to be implemented. It's all automatic for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from an architect's perspective, my role is to help customers size for what they need. And then if obviously they have a burst capability on premises, I have to cater for that 24/7. I can't give them a burst capability on premises very easily. So in the cloud, it's much easier. They might have, say, 12 nodes, for business as usual throughout the year, and then they'll burst up to 24 and then, drop back to 12 after that peak period. So I think it's incredibly valuable. And one thing I've discussed with previous guests is the cost of pay-as-you-go, may be significantly higher, of course, than a reserved instance. But if you're only using it for a short period of time, it equates to a big saving. So you might have 12 as your reserve instance over 3 years, and then the other 12 you're only using for 1 or 2 months in a year. The pay-as-you-go for 2 months of the year is far less than 12 months of reserved. So it's a business benefit as well. So again, if people look at that TCO and the ROI, I think these offerings are incredibly valuable. And in fact, they're undervalued, I think, due to how quickly you can actually get results.
Yeah, another thing about on-demand and versus RI, some use cases would be more effective on demand. For example, VDI scenario, right? Virtual desktops. If you have a contact center that runs 24/7, for sure, that's a consistent flow. RI is the best way to go, and you'll get the best savings from any cloud provider. However, if this is something that you're doing, you have additional workforce that is coming for a couple of hours during the day, you don't need RI. You can calculate how many hours, let's say if it's 6 hours, 5 hours that they're using per day, you can turn on and turn off that service. So calculation, what we've done before, it shows that on-demand price, although the unit price is more expensive, but when you extrapolate it, it looks much cheaper than committing to RI. So that's where, you have to factor what is the workload, how much time is it running, and how many concurrent users are using it.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that a lot of customers struggle with is when they have a project and they want to set up a test environment, very difficult to do on premises because there's that CapEx involved. The setup is not automated, and obviously they've got to have resources available to do it. Whereas obviously on these multi-cloud solutions, we can run up a test environment, do some testing, complete that project, and then either, migrate those into the production environment, or archive, back up them, and then remove that environment. This is something that will allow customers to actually do proper testing, be compliant, maintain higher levels of governance and security without enormous cost, because dedicated test environments and DR tests and things like that are, for a lot of customers, prohibitively expensive. But I think these new solutions make it not only attractive, it's very optimal to do.
Yeah, and this is when, I told to you that the use case that usually customers consider is DR. What we offer to them, don't have DR just for the sake of DR. You have to buy 3 nodes. It's still, it's a significant amount of resources that you're investing. Don't let it sit there. Do all the testing. While there is no DR event, do the testing, leverage that environment. And if in case something happened, that environment will scale up and that will provision more nodes. But absolutely, I don't think why would anyone do testing on their on-premises environment. It's just so expensive.
It's too expensive. And to be honest, it's not only is it too expensive, it takes too long. It's just too difficult for a new project within an organization to source hardware, get it stood up and designed and everything. Realistically, if someone wants to engage my team to do a design to set up test environments on their on-prem environment, they're going to pay a fortune because there's a lot of work involved in doing that architecture correctly and to a good standard. Whereas if we put them into AVS, we can deliver that outcome quicker at a much lower cost. And my team's time can focus on the 20%, which is the custom layer for that customer, instead of just the infrastructure piece, which is largely repeatable. So, I think from a customer perspective, sure, if they want to pay me to do it, we'll do it for them, but I would prefer to help them with a more modern solution that's a better outcome.
But it's not only cost. And when you talk to the business leaders, cost is something, like everyone who likes to drive the cost, but it's more about agility and innovation. And you can't get that innovation on your on-premise because you don't have access to the ecosystem of cloud services. Like I mentioned, AI is a big thing now, machine learning, databases, big analytics, all that you can do even if you're doing testing on AVS. You have immediate access to all the services of Azure because it's a native service. Plus, you have access to a huge ecosystem of ISV solutions, whether it's horizontal or vertical ISV solutions, so that you don't need to develop products. You can just plug and play those solutions into your test environment and see whether you want to build something from the scratch or you can leverage any of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, using cloud native services is much easier when you've got your entire environment sitting right beside it, both from a latency perspective and a service availability and a simplicity perspective. Using cloud native services right beside AVS or GCVE, makes life a lot easier for developers. But the other thing is, let's say we've got a customer who's deployed on AVS and they want to take a copy of their environment and they want to test some new things. They can do the intelligent cloning, obviously, on the vSAN layer, use that workload. They don't have to pay for new instances, so their test environment can be done effectively for free using the resources they're already paying for. And then if they want to separate that out to a new environment, they can certainly do that quickly and easily, but they're not paying per instance for each of those copies of those VMs. So I think this is something that's underestimated. If we're cloud native and we copy a VM, that's another thing we're paying for. If we're on AVS, GCVE, or any of these solutions, we can clone a bunch of VMs, and there's usually, or more likely than not, there's resource available within that pool of resource that you mentioned earlier for them to utilize for those activities. So many commercial benefits and reducing cost just by adding that virtualization layer on top of that hyperscaler. So I wanted to talk about some futures. So obviously we've talked a lot about where things are at the moment. Where do you see these multi-cloud solutions in, say, the next 12 or 18 months?
Well, I think a lot of announcements will be made in a couple of weeks at Explore. So if you're launching this at Explore, you would probably know about those. They are currently under NDA, but the overall direction is that VMware continue investing in a multi-cloud, making it simpler to customers to run across the multi-cloud and manage multi-cloud offerings. We are expanding providers that can offer the service. Like, for example, something that was launched just recently, the sovereign cloud. So in many countries worldwide, we have now partners in the country that can host that VMware cloud environment in their clouds, private clouds, and they are sovereign, so that your data resides there. Everything is secure if you don't want your applications to access outside of the country. We also see that our public cloud providers like Microsoft and Oracle, they are bringing these solutions into their government clusters, which is also highly secure. We have federal in US. Oracle Cloud VMware Solution has been just launched in Canberra this week, which is a big news for Australia government customers that now they can run out of Canberra. So there is more and more development happening in this space. We'll see better licensing, something that will launch this year as a VMware Cloud Universal, VMCU for short, that existed previously for VMC on AWS, where the customers can actually procure VMCU credits from VMware now and apply those credits for whether VMC on AWS or AVS or GCV. The more cloud providers will be joining this program shortly. So that's also simplifying the way customers can buy these credits and deploy them at any cloud that they want. So they don't have to make a commitment now for one cloud provider, but they have full flexibility to mix and change at any time they want.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. I think from a technical perspective, we can already move between providers, but having that credit system allows the commercial side to match the capability of the technical side. So again, I think the business and the technical side are really married up beautifully in these multi-cloud solutions. Yeah. So, that's very exciting. And this is obviously launched after Explore, so we're pre-recording it for everyone listening. But so definitely some exciting stuff coming up.
VMCU is already there. VMCU is already there. It's operational, but there is more announcements to be made in Explore.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm certainly looking forward to being there, and we've got some announcements from my company as well, which is going to be really good. So can you talk about a couple of customers in the region where we both are in APJ, that some success stories and what business problems we've solved with these solutions?
Yes, absolutely. We've been running this hyperscaler offerings for almost 3 years. VMC on AWS existed for much longer, about 6 years. Hyperscaler offerings came a bit later. And in this region, we have over 150 customers already leveraging these solutions. It's usually enterprise customers. Of course, it's a VMware customer that have their workloads sitting on vSphere and spinning across multiple industries from FSI, government, healthcare, retail, manufacturing, and even corporate-sized businesses, what we call mid-market in media and entertainment. So some of the biggest customers we have today are in FSI and retail. A lot of them are based in Australia. I cannot name their names, but you're probably using their services on a daily basis. And the way it usually starts, I mentioned, like it's DR first. Some of the first use cases we had with end of support for Windows Server 2008 at that time, helping customers to save money on those extended security updates. So that's where we still see a huge bulk of money that customers are paying to Microsoft without even knowing how they can save it, because a lot of those applications, they are sitting on premise. No one wants to touch them. They're legacy application. No one can retire them. So they're kind of stuck. They're very expensive bulk. And that's where we are helping customers to get rid of that bulk. First of all, get it on the cloud and then see if you can modernize from there. And then we're seeing also customers, especially after pandemic, exiting their current agreements with data center providers. And we have a number of large data center exits. For example, one of our telco customers in Malaysia, they had a very urgent timeline to exit the data center. And the CIO, shared later that they didn't believe the value proposition of AVS. They thought it's too good to be true. But then he actually came to the event on stage and said, I didn't believe it, but I was wrong. They managed to migrate 120 applications in 45 days.
I mean, I think every CIO listening to this and every architect is very impressed by that, because we all know how complicated and time consuming it can be. So yeah, I think that's a great example of that genuine value. It's not like in IT, we have a lot of marketecture is what I call it. And it's like marketing, and it's sort of over promises and under delivers. I think this multi-cloud, solutions, I think they over deliver actually, because people don't believe the value that's in the marketing, because it does sound unrealistic. Even to an architect, I think most architects would go, oh, geez, this sounds a bit too good to be true. But once you experience it, once you've deployed them, once you've tested them, and you realize that actually all the marketing quite closely matches the reality, I think it's incredible to consider. And I think the only area which is still very complicated, and it's not really a VMware problem to solve per se, is just the networking between all these different providers is probably the most complicated piece. But outside of that, I think everything else is done, incredibly well already. So I'm quite excited for the next couple of years to see how much simpler these solutions can be made.
Yes, and networking, and that's where we're seeing challenges or some delays. It's around the on-premise networking, where some of the customers, they don't really have full understanding how their current networking is set up. For example, it was managed by a hoster, and then when we're moving that environment from hoster to public cloud, the hoster is not engaging. There is no runbooks, or someone was doing this before and then left, and there is no records. So that's where we usually have challenge, because we need to have a full analysis of the current on-premise environment. That's what is being done in the assessment stage. That's where partners like yourself or even VMware services are coming in to do planning and assessment, which is a very important step before you actually migrate, right? You need to understand what you have today, what will be moving, and what are the dependencies there. Again, there are technologies even from VMware that can help you with the area, visualize networking insights and many other tools that will help you map all those dependencies, but you need to build the architecture, and we have multiple reference architectures that are available, and we're consulting our customers on the best practices to build that, so that migration is really seamless. So that becomes a matter of hours, and then there is no hiccups over there.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone listening, definitely getting that planning phase right the first time is critical. A lot of these cloud solutions, once you deploy an SDDC, you can't change, IPs and things like this in some cases. So definitely that current state assessment or a health check of what you've got today is critical to making sure that move into the cloud is going to be successful, and we don't have to re-architect and re-IP and do all this cost and complexity down the track. But once we've got that first step sorted and done properly, it really does make for a seamless migration. And moving, hundreds of apps, like you just mentioned in that example, is actually possible. And not only possible, it will happen as long as you follow that process of doing your planning right. It can be achieved. And obviously VMware's got a lot of partners who are willing to help with that. So looking onto VM Explorer, do you have anything you can share without breaching any NDAs? Anything you're doing at Explore, either in Las Vegas or in Singapore, that people should look out for?
Well, I think I will not be a spoiler for VMware Explorer. There's a lot of great news coming in. We have a lot of sponsors coming from hyperscalers, both in Vegas and in Singapore. Have our customers from Asia flying to VMware Explorer and also presenting here in Singapore. So I would say just stay tuned. And if you are coming to Singapore, please find me. I'll be probably running around the multi-cloud booth and the booth from our partners. So we'll be happy to have a conversation with you and connect you with our existing customers if they're on site.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'll be at both events, so we can meet each other in person. And I appreciate you taking the time today, talking about a topic we're both, we both love and enjoy in our day-to-day lives. So look forward to seeing you at Explore and meeting all of the listeners.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you very much.